Hi, this is Jared Polak, founder of Entre Results, author of Entre Balance, author of Entre Business, and founder of Entre Results Academy, back for another awesome podcast. If you haven't checked us out, Entre Results Academy recently launched. Very excited about this program. Really gives people an opportunity, some small business, solo entrepreneurs, a chance to experience coaching for a very, very, very competitive investment. So here we are today. We're going to talk about something near and dear to my heart in regards to business development. Now, I was going for a run on Monday morning, and I was running, I think it was about a 5-mile jog, as I was running towards a place on the corner of two streets. I started to smell something absolutely disgusting. And as I ran closer and closer, I realized that there was a dead carcass on the side of the road, and there was these vultures that are sort of hovering around this dead carcass. It was just a foul odor. It was a horrible experience to kind of run past that, but it reminded me of an idea, and the idea is how to not be a vulture in sales. Now, this probably isn't going to be what you think it's going to be in regards to being a vulture in sales. I think I'm going to go a little bit of in a different direction, but just follow with me for a second. So, one thing I noticed is you have these vultures that are just picking on dead carcass. That's what they do. They pick on dead carcass. And a lot of times in the sales industry, I see sales professionals, or maybe they're not quite professionals yet, but learning to be sales professionals, just focusing on those dead leads, those dead prospects, trying to pick away at something or someone who doesn't really have the ability to invest in your product and service. And so they're completely dead, and there's a level of frustration because they're just trying to basically revive a dead body in regards to a prospect and focusing too much attention on unqualified leads. Now, so I have like 6 things to think about to not be a vulture in sales. Number 1 is to identify and prioritize. So identifying all your different prospects and prioritizing the time frame and the amount of follow-up that is going to need to happen for each one of your prospects. And this is gonna be number 2, 3, 4. It's kind of a sub-component of number 1, but number 2 is, the first thing I would do is identify your hot prospects. Now, you can define hot prospects how you see fit as long as you're consistent with how you define hot prospects. But for my definition, a hot prospect is someone who showed a willingness or was eager or showed some interest in your product or your service. So in some ways, the marketing worked and they're a qualified prospect. They raised their hand and they showed interest in your product or service. In addition to that, though, the hot prospect also, in your opinion at this point, has the ability to invest in your product or service. So they're interested in your product or service, and they have the ability to pay based on what you know right now. Now, as you go through the sales process, you might learn a little bit more, but for right now, they are considered hot because they have money and they're interested in your product or service. So that would be the first level of identification. Number 2 is you could identify what would be called warm prospects. Now, warm prospects, again, you can define these how you see fit as long as you're consistent with your definitions. But a warm prospect, by my definition, would be someone who raised their hand and said they're interested in your product or service. However, you do have some doubts, or you have some considerable doubts that they don't have the money to invest in your product or service. So they're warm because they're interested, but you're not sure if they have the money to buy. Or a warm prospect could be defined as someone who you do think you're pretty confident has the ability to invest, but they haven't completely raised their hand yet. Maybe they just seemed a little bit curious, or you feel like they would be curious about your product or service, but they haven't really said, hey, I really am interested in what you have. That would be considered a warm prospect by my definition. And the third thing to look at, point number 4, so you have identify and prioritize number 1. hot prospect number 2, warm prospect number 3. The fourth is cold prospect. Now, a cold prospect, in my mind, would be someone who, maybe they were a warm prospect and you realize that they don't have the money for sure. So they're interested in your product or service, but you're certain they don't have the money right now. They would get moved to a cold prospect. Now, depending on your industry and what you're selling, someone could be a cold prospect where you'd think, hey, a year from now or 2 years from now, they could have the money to invest in my product or service. So they're not dead yet, but they're just cold or cool. So it could be someone who a year or two down the line might have the money or they're interested, or it could be someone who you did realize they do have the money, but they're not interested in your product or service, or you're confident that for the next year or two, or 6 months or 5 years, depending on what you're selling, they have the money, but they're just not interested right now. So that would be a cold prospect. Now, the fifth thing would be dead or inactive. A dead or inactive prospect. This might be someone who, oh gosh, if you only sell to someone geographically in your area, they don't live in your area anymore. They're outside of your area. They moved away. Or you find out that if you're selling to a certain business, this business has gone out of business and is no longer if they're basically dead or inactive. And so anyway, that's how you identify who is dead or inactive. Basically, no way for them to, buy from you in the future. However, sometimes people that become dead or inactive, maybe they could be referral sources for you or things like that, but they're dead and inactive in regards to prospect. So you've identified hot, warm, cold, and then dead, inactive. So number 5 is to categorize someone dead and inactive. And then number 6 is to have a process for follow-up of each of these different areas. So for hot prospect, how do you follow up? For warm prospect, how do you follow up? For cold prospect, how do you follow up? And then dead and inactive, there's going to be very, very little follow-up. And so my suggestion is the hotter the prospect on the cold is going to be like the cooler it is, the more automation, the more using just email marketing, automated campaigns where if there's someone's hot and sometimes warm, it's a little bit more of your individual touch as a salesperson. So hot prospect, you might identify these are the 11 to 15 things you're going to do to follow up with a hot prospect. And it might be a card that gets mailed to them with specific notes. Definitely phone calls. Some phone calls when you leave a message, some phone calls when you don't leave a message. Text message becomes key right now for a lot of people. And then certainly email. And so identify 11 to 15 different steps. Again, your industry, depending on the size of your product or service, depends on the amount of follow-up. Obviously, the higher the price point, you might have 100 different follow-ups. The lower the price point, less follow-ups. But generally speaking, I think for a hot prospect or sometimes a warm prospect, sometimes 11 to 15 touches is a good amount before you kind of move them to a different level of automation. So, all that being said, don't be a vulture in sales. If you're feeling frustrated right now, maybe what you need to do is identify and prioritize. Make sure you know who your hot, warm, cold, and dead and active prospects are, and then have a process for following up for each. Go out, take action, and have a better than amazing day.